We are going to go over essentially key points in in my timeline. So what we're going to do is I've done another video where I kind of show you this overall arching picture. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of zoom in on a little bit and pick just the certain individual timeline points and just thoughts on their significance, thoughts on my regrets, looking at it this way. Are there regrets that I have? So or non-regrets, things that have gone really well. We'll go over a lot of what we're going to go over today is like 401k information, like decision points I make, right? Like how much am I going to save? What was the impact of that savings? Things of that nature. That will definitely at some big point doing expenses video, because what that means, expenses are much harder. Like sitting down and when you're 25, even my kids today, when you're 25 and knowing what the right things to do and doing them are a lot easier today than they were when I was a kid. Like they didn't even talk about a 401k. The 401k was made in 1978 and they didn't say a word. I just thought I had my pension, which was not a great pension, even though it was a big company. So these steps are going to be a little easier, not quite as many details. What you're going to see when we get into the expense side of the house in some future videos, it's a lot more work. Like the actual, it's amazing, right? Like planning for retirement, saving for retirement can be relatively simple. You just do the best you can. Planning for retirement, when you actually go to execute on it, is much harder because then you need to know expenses, you need to know future expenses, you need to know long-term care. So what I'm going to be looking at is the past, sort of like what were the steps I took basically in essence to build my 401k, to pay off my house, things like that. So let's go over it. Now you'll see this is my age and the years are across the top. So really easy. The first thing is I had a pension from 1990 to 1997. So like I said, we'll get into that. I got a pension. I ended up buying out at $60,000 when I like later on sometime in here somewhere like 2020. It was right around the pandemic era. Um, so during these years, I really didn't do anything, which brings me to my first regret. The 401k started in 1978. And it's just interesting and nobody told me, my parents didn't do any planning for retirement, nothing like that. I don't even think they thought about it. And what I started to discover is I was getting really frustrated with my job in like the 2018, 2017. And I think that's what started driving me to really start planning for retirement because I just didn't want to do it anymore. Okay, so let's talk in theory. What had happened if I had been a little smarter? And this is more or less for the youngsters. Is if from 1990 to 1997, when there was a 401k, even though although the company didn't offer it, so I guess there wasn't anything I could do. I could have invested after tax in the market, I guess. It like what would have happened with some simple numbers, and we'll just take a minute. So let's just say this first 9 years of school, if I had put away $3,000 a year, that's like what, 2250 a month. That's not completely unreasonable. So if you go in here and I would have put away, what did I say, 3,000 a year, so 3 times 9, that's 27,000. Oops, 27,000. What would happen if I'd start and I couldn't go? I had to start in year 1998 because I didn't want to do each and every single year. I said let's assume the worst case scenario. That's bearing no interest for those 9 years. I just saved $27,000 and I stuck it into the market in 1998, the S&P 500. Um, I would have had $273,000. So clearly, what we see and what we all know, and I think most of the young people know now, is as you go later on in life, it's that early money that you put in that makes all the money. Now let's go to the second thing, which I just happens to be a good time, so we'll talk about it. Is during those 9 years, I was getting a pension. So that pension would have paid out at the tune of like $300 a month, starting at 57. I'll probably do a little more details on this, but what I'm finding in doing these videos is I've lost a lot of the details because they don't store them. So what would have happened if I had gotten a pension of even a minimal amount, like to me, $3,000 a year is a minimal amount. Well, it would have been the same deal, right? Um, I would have had $273,000 as of today. Now we'll do another video on breaking that out, like how much that would have been as a month, because that's all my pension was, right? It's just kind of a pseudo guaranteed annuity. So this versus the $300 a month. But even if you take this at a minimal 5% return, so 10% return would be like 27. That's 13,000 a year at a 5% return. Half of that, 6,000 a year. So even if the markets only did like 2% return, I would still get $500 a month, which is $200 more than the $300 a month I would have gotten, and that's with a minimal S&P 500 return. But then let's take that one step further. What if two things happened? What if instead of I not only did I put in 300 a month, but I got 300 or but I also got like 3,000 a year essentially from my pension. So then I would have been looking at 546 grand as of now. And that's just for 9 years, and that's me not putting anything else in besides that. So that clearly, and you can see that in a million places on the internet, but to me it can't be said enough, and I tell this to my kids all the time: do the early stuff. There's another whole conversation with do the early stuff with Roth, because hopefully if you play your cards right when you first get out of school, you'll be making less than you'll ever make. So that's when you want to pay those taxes. But that's another discussion. Maybe we'll have a video on that as well. Okay, so that was my first regret, is I didn't invest. I didn't have a 401k, but I didn't even invest. So I could have invested. Even though it was much harder then. You couldn't just go to Robinhood or pick up something real quick. You had to know somebody, or you had to have a stockbroker or whatever to do your stock trades for you. So that was 1998. In 1998, I moved on to another job where it was a small company. We had to have a 401k. So in 1998, I started my 401k. I wasn't like super serious about it for a couple of years, so I was only putting in like 400 a month, and then I got serious about it a couple years later and was maxing out. What really happened was 3 years later, 2 years later, I went to work for another company. I was in this small consulting firm for 2 years. Then I went to work for a little bigger firm for a couple of years, and then went to an even bigger firm after a couple of years from there. And at one point, that bigger firm was doing 50% matching. So I was putting in like, I think it was 9,000 a year. But then when they went up to 50% matching, I kicked it up to 16 grand, and then just did the max that I could. Okay, so I started my 401k in 1998 when I was 31. My next big one was here we go. When I maxed out my 401k. So in 2007, I actually started maxing out my 401k, which should be hope for everyone, right? Because I actually really, and the reason why it worked out well. I also did have some transfer money, but I really started hammering my 401k in when I was 40. That was when I really hit it hard and maxed out everything. So what you're going to see, there is a tab here I'm going to show that breaks down my contributions by age or by year. We'll go over that real quick. Okay, next it should be important for everybody, is the day I turned 50, I started putting in the catch up, which at the time I think was like $6,500, $7,000. So you'll see there I was putting in my 16, whatever the max was, 16, 17, doesn't matter. Plus they were matching that 25%, so I got 4. Plus I started maxing out with these $6,000 a year extra. So anybody who's contemplating turning 50, I was thrilled. That January, right away, I put my money away. So since you're probably going a little nuts, now's probably a good time to break into the 401k contributions. So what I did is I went back and found what my 401k contributions were over the years. So you could see in 2004, when I was actually 37, I was maxing it out. So it's the wrong tab there. So at 2004 is when I really started maxing things out. The reason it's recorded at 2004 is because that's when Jeffries bought our company. So that was the last company I went to work for because they bought the company I was working before. So the 401k is officially under there. So I got some transfer monies in from my old company, and this is the record of just my contributions. So you'll see max. I mean, this is the reason why this actually looks like more than max, because this number, when I went out and I summed it, it actually includes the 25% contribution. So you can see max for the, I don't know why I didn't max out this year, but max, and this is with their contribution, max. Like, you just gotta max. If you want to get out of the rat race, you gotta max it. And the funny thing is, if you max it early in your career, you really don't miss it. But you have to max it earlier and just live without that money, which isn't revolutionary rocket science. This news, max. This was when I bought out my pension. So the reason this says 93,000 in contributions is because that was when I bought out my pension was 60,000. And the reason you see this start to go up, this is when I turned 50. So it's 26,000 a year because I was taking advantage of the $6,000 catch up stuff. So this is with my EDS pension rollover. This is when I started my backdoor Roth. So I had gotten a raise in 2022. It was like $1,000 a month, I think it was, a raise. So, and obviously that's the obvious stuff too. When you get a raise, flip it into something, whether it's increasing. It's kind of like debt, right? If you can't, like, I understand that starting out these maxes is not realistic for him, but it's kind of like what Dave Ramsey does with debt. He says tackle the little things first. So, just do an extra 1%, do an extra 2. When you get a raise, do the put a chunk of that raise right into your 401k. It's pretty easy now. You just go out to the website and say increase my percentage. Um, so so this is when I started the backdoor Roth. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know I could do it. And so I called Fidelity and they said, oh yeah, we'll take care of everything for you. So you'll see that's when my contributions went up, because I took my $1,000 a month raise and just shoved it right into a backdoor Roth. So that's why you see those numbers went up. And then 2024, is when I retired. So that's why I retired in March. So that was 3 months worth of contributions. So the important thing to know right now is that this is a sum. The only thing is it doesn't show my rollover. So there was some money I rolled over from my prior company, which isn't in here. But so there should be. Oh no, 2004. That is the rollover, because I wasn't really all that serious. 2004. Here, let's take a look. What was going on in 2004? Yeah, 2004. I wasn't. That was when I really got hung up at maxing. So that must have been including my rollover. So what happened is that probably includes my rollover. That's the year I probably went to work for Jeffries, in January or something. So I had $18,000 saved. So I wasn't even totally going crazy the year before. So this is a summary of my total contributions and I'd rolled over my 401ks into this. So right now my 401k is worth about 1.4 million. So that's pretty awesome, right? If you just do it consistently, dollar cost averaging, then this 426 of my contributions became 1.46. I think I'm at 1,460,000 right now. So it's such a win-win. I know people love pensions. All I can speak from is my preference, because it wasn't a government job or something like that. My pension for 9 years of service was only going to translate out to like $300 a month. So I would rather, and not only that, there were with conditions attached to it. Like, could my wife inherit it? I couldn't use it until I was 57, or it may have been higher than that. I think it was 57 though. So And what happens if you're terminated? I mean, 401k, it just gives you control. But I guess the reason people don't like, I love my 401k. The reason people don't like it is because it also puts the responsibility on you. If these numbers were all zero, then I'd be totally screwed. So I guess it's back to personal responsibility, which don't get me started. Okay, so what's that bring me to? Oh yeah, so I got really serious. Um, Somewhere in this range, 2018, 2019, I started really just saying, hey, I'm going a little bit crazy. um, that I mean, I could go on to why, but my job was getting really hard. I was 51, 52. I wasn't C-level. I was making good money, which we'll get into it, in another session, how much our income was throughout all these years. But it was just tiring. I was so burned out. I was going into New York. I was at an age where I wasn't sure if I wasn't ready to reprove myself. And so I got tired. So this is when everything started getting real, really real for me. I started at setting up my first spreadsheet in 2018 to say, hey, how do I make this exit plan really work? We were always doing the right thing, but we kind of went back to, I went and said, what would a end of work cycle look like for a budget and stuff like that. So that's this 600, because it all kind of happened at the same time. One of the things I wanted to get off my neck before I retired, even though I had a good interest rate, it was just a mental thing. I said I wanted to get my mortgage done so that when I went at some point, I could be debt free. So that's in 2018. We started plugging away like another 600 a month into the mortgage. I started putting together a real exit plan in 2019. What that looked like was a spreadsheet. I started putting in a spreadsheet, got more and more complex. Eventually, with software, which I will. I'll get into all the software. I'll even get into the people I listen to. We'll do a whole session on those things. Uh, and so that was when this whole plan started to come together. So we paid off the house at when I was 53 in 2020. Also, we had made it a point to pay off our cars, which is kind of a problem sometimes. I tend to run cars too long, so that by the time they're done for, they're completely done for, and I've probably put too much into repairs in them. But generally, in 2020 was when we went completely debt free. No houses, no cars, no house payment, no cars. I still had the stupid 1,000 a month property taxes, but you'll probably hear about that on my videos. So what we did was, at that point in time when we paid off the house, we started taking 2,000. I was already putting away 2,000 a month in savings for just future. I always had different savings accounts, but we'll get into that in another discussion, how I manage day to day and then how I manage day to day afterwards in retirement. But we took the 2,000 a month that we were paying for the mortgage and didn't use it, didn't do anything, just shoved it right into savings. And the reason I knew I was going to need to be a little bit cash heavy, and so we literally put that into savings accounts and got like nothing. We were getting like nothing out of it at the time. But I didn't care. I was like, I just got to start building up the cash. So we did that. We were already saving 2,000 a month for just general savings, like emergency savings stuff. So I added 2,000 a month that I didn't have the car payment or the house payment. So that put me at like 48,000 a year now. That, not including 401ks and stuff like that, of savings. Um, let's see here. So we talked about the backdoor Roth. I started that in 2023. So that ended up netting me like 30 grand, because I just took my raise and put it right into, actually, was that 2022? It doesn't matter. I put that right into my 401k. So then what happened, which was really a nice bonus, was I had been saving this money between the 2K a year, 2K a month, plus when we paid off our mortgage, we were putting away like 48 grand a year starting in 2020. So when our buddy in the Fed raised interest rates in 2022, what was it? Powell. Yes, Powell. When Powell raised the rates, I was thrilled because rates were around like almost zero. So I was looking at my bank statement and I had like 150 grand in my local bank, and I was getting nothing. Like, here's your $5 or whatever. So this what the second that happened and the rates started going up, I moved 150,000 into CDs, which started making it. And I didn't need those. I haven't even needed those when I retired. So those have just been sitting there collecting interest. Um, the other thing I did was, which we'll talk about a little later, I guess, when we get into the portfolio that I have in my 401k and in my wife's, I got really conservative. I got really nervous as I started getting closer to my March 2024 date, and I was in a lot of S&P. I still love the S&P 500, but so what I did is I moved into a brokerage link. It's within my 401k. It's a Fidelity brokerage account where you can do like individual stock trades. The other thing too is because I worked for a financial company, I could basically do no individual stock trades. I had to get permission to buy, to sell. And to be honest, I'm horrible. I don't do, you'll see this in my portfolio when we get to that. I don't do like stock picks very well. I just stick because it stresses me out too much. So, but what I did do around this time too, about a year and change before I actually retired, I moved a lot of money into this brokerage link, and it turned out the brokerage link, to thumbs up Fidelity, was nothing more than a short-term treasury bond fund that they put into. So I'm still making like I think 4% in there. So I was, at this time when I was making excuse me 5% on CDs, I was also making money in my brokerage link. Okay, another thing we did here. So in 2024, which I know this is kind of stupid. Financially, we've been doing it anyway, but I was planning on retiring in March or April. And so come January, we just lived on Beth's income. We said, okay, I stopped her 403Bs in 2023, and I was just putting her 403B stuff in the savings. But so technically, we've been living on like that. We would live with her as her money sometime in late 2023. But in 2024, for like 3-4 months, we just lived on nothing but her salary, and just saw how it would work. And you'll see, I did a lot more planning than that, but we'll get into that when we get into expenses. So, and ultimately, my ultimate point here was retired in March of 2024. We're still having some issues about that. Like, would I rather? Um, I'm doing a YouTube thing mainly for my kids, and it's mainly just for people and friends if they're approaching, because it's just gonna be all details. But I'm doing this. We'll get into my whole daily routine because I try and stay busy. I stay away from the TV, things like that. But we'll see. We'll see if the Lord turns up something where I go back to work. I may go back to work temporarily. For some reason, I really thought my old company would call me, but they didn't, which is another whole discussion. So we looked at my total contributions. We went through the money part. We went through all my regrets. Let's see. We talked about this. So I'm going to wrap it up with that today. We're looking to do is, I just wanted to show all these different points. We'll definitely do a video, like I said, showing different points. This is kind of a story of how I built my 401k. And we built Beth's 401k kind of the same way. When she went back to work, we just maxed hers out. There's a great book though that talks about, which I'll get into all the books I read too, is that talks about how it's just great. I was worried in some of my videos it doesn't sound great to have kids. It's so awesome. I was looking at pictures, and kids just add so much to your life non-financially that I don't think people realize. I was doing the treadmill, and I looked over and I saw a picture of my kids when they were like little, and I have the 4 kids in case you haven't seen my history. And it was awesome, man. Those years were so hard financially, but they were just some of the best years ever. So, but one of the financial byproducts of having kids is it's almost like a buffer, right? Because what happens is you get used to living with all these expenses you have with kids, and all of a sudden your kids get older, and all those expenses go away, and so all of a sudden you have a lot more money ready for your retirement than you may have thought, because you could truly live on less than you thought. So that wraps it up. I'm going to close